Hello again, everybody. Red here to show some more of my favorite cards. Been a little bit since I have done this. I've been busy watching a lot of you guys showing your favorite or top valued cards anyway, top 50s, top 100s. Something I never really wanted to do so much is doing it based on value, but I guess I'm getting to realize it's just a fun and cool way to get to look at some really good cards. So maybe next year I'll do something similar. I'm not ready to get any kind of ranking by value at this time, but I have been entering a lot of my graded cards at least into card ladders, so maybe I can get a graded card list. A lot of my better cards though are still ungraded. I really do like them that way still. I like graded cards too. And today you're going to get 3 ungraded cards in my top 400 list. First, I want to show what we showed last time, this W503 1922 card. You don't see a whole lot of Frankie Frisch. We got a Cracker Jack, a big Ed Walsh, and then the only Topps card made of Satchel Paige. But before we get into this week's cards, I gotta just show you a little northern Minnesota little clip my wife took of me out on the roof yesterday. So here is a typical Minnesota winter, not the last few, where we get the roof rake out so our roof doesn't collapse, and we just got a new roof and shingles, so I'll try to protect that a little bit. Here's what our deck looks like where I've done some of our filming, and then here's that view that I show. Here's what it looks like in a typical winter. I think last December I was doing a video here on the deck. It was still nice and there wasn't any ice on the lake until December, but this year's a little different. So needless to say, we're filming inside this week, and here's what we're going to start out showing you. So I'm going to start with a card that when I bought it, and it was 2005, I found the receipt on it, was the card I had paid the most for of any card that I owned at the time. It was a $3,000 card. And it's one that probably hasn't gone up a ton like some others have in those 20 years. I'm guessing it's in the 8,000-9,000 range now, which makes it really expensive even at that price to try to grade it. So you can see a lot of back damage, so it'd be one of those that'll get a 1. Must have been in a scrapbook, but these old Judges are thick cards. And this is of the originator of many things in baseball, Harry Wright, in 172 card. Now, Harry at this time is already 52 years old. He's a veteran manager of the Philadelphia Phillies, the 4th and final team that he led. Prior to this card, he had already won 6 league championships for Boston franchises in the 1870s, 4 straight when they were the Boston Red Stockings, part of the National Association, and then 2 after Boston joined the National League, which still exists. It started in 1876. They were just the Boston Reds at the time, and he won 2 championships there. Now, Harry started as a cricket player. He was born in England to a cricket pro dad, and he was only 3 years old when they moved to New York. And as baseball became popular when he was in his 20s, he switched to baseball. But he was already, he was a really good baseball player, but he was already 34 by the time he was playing with the Cincinnati Red Stockings in 1869, which was really that first pro team. He was a star player of that team, also managed the club. And in those days, a manager meant you were mainly a GM. You probably wrote a lineup, but you didn't even really have subs or didn't use subs. You couldn't even use subs unless you got agreement from both teams that you could do so. So there wasn't a whole lot of game strategy so much, but he did, he did a lot of things mostly as a GM to put that team together. He's in that very first 1869 team card of the Reds. He's on that. And so is his brother, his brother George Wright is the guy who he got to play. He was 12 years younger than Harry, and that's the guy who really made the team take off. George was the best player of the 1870s by quite a bit, and George helped, win all those championships. But then there came along a guy. Here's actually a picture of George, his young brother. Then there came along this guy, Candy Cummings, and he and some other guys like A.J. Spalding started throwing curveballs, and all of a sudden George Wright found it pretty hard to hit curveballs. He was kind of like Serrano from Major League. Tough time hitting the curveball, and like Serrano, he ended up selling insurance for State Farm later on. Not really. But back to Harry Wright. Harry, some of his innovations were the 7th inning stretch, hitting fungos, giving batting practice to his players before games. So he was this big time, originator basically of a lot of things in baseball, and one of the first pros, the guy who got really the first pro teams going, Harry Wright. Now, the next card I want to show is from 1911, from the T205 series, and this is the great Tris Speaker. And just to show a little difference between American League and National Leaguers in these T205s, the National Leaguers are pretty much the whole card is dominated by the pitcher, other than a little facsimile autograph in there and team stuff. But the American League cards that Tris Speaker is from with the Boston Red Sox, they've got, the more of this emblem stuff with bats and balls and gloves, and makes the pitcher a little smaller. I actually prefer the National League side. I've heard some other people prefer the American League side with more of a design, but I kind of like it with the big pitcher in there that you get from the National Leaguers. But these T205s, always like them because they do tell a little story about players on the back, and I've always loved backs of baseball cards. Gives a few stats in there. And this is from the Piedmont variety. Now, a little bit about Tris Speaker. Tris Speaker was such a good fielding center fielder that he actually had a poem written about him. Grantland Rice wrote this poem called When Speaker Swings Out for a Fly. And I think by swinging out for a fly, I meant like running out for a fly. So when Speaker swings out for a fly that leaves a blot against the sky, the graces known of old fade out. Where form and art are forced to yield and rhythm leaves in utter rout before perfection on the field. Poised for the sprint on agile sweep for Texas tap or wallow deep, the poetry of motion fades and passes onward with a sigh, and all the graces look like jades when Speaker swings out for a fly. By Grantland Rice. So before there was Willie Mays in that 1954 big World Series catch, the most famous World Series catch was by Tris Speaker. And unfortunately, there was no video of this because it was October 9th of 1915. It was with 2 outs in the bottom of the 9th inning. The Phillies are playing the Red Sox, so the Phillies are at home. Tris in the bottom of the 9th is in the outfield with the Red Sox. The Red Sox are clinging to a 2-1 lead. The Phillies have the tying run at second base. Dode Paschert comes to the plate for the Phillies, and sports writer John Foster captured the moment in the New York Times, saying, "Everyone but the Red Sox center fielder knew the ball was gone for a Philly victory off of Dode's bat. Off with the crack of the bat from his normal shallow position, Tris reached the center field fence, leapt up, half his body over the wall, came down with the ball clutched in his tiny mitt. Philly partisans groaned as the Red Sox center fielder had the ball aloft, showing the umpires that he had made the catch. The hostile crowd nevertheless gave him an appreciative ovation as his teammates mobbed him on their way off the field. Among those who stood to applaud was President Woodrow Wilson, who had thrown out the first ball and watched the entire game from a box seat next to the Phillies bench in the company of his future bride, Mrs. Edith Galt. So, Tris Speaker, not only was he a great fielder, probably the best fielding center fielder of his era. He definitely was the best fielding center fielder of his era. But the Gray Eagle, as he was known, because he turned gray so young. Now, not on this card yet. Here he's young enough, but man, by the time he was 30, he was pretty gray-haired. But he was way better of a fielder than Ty Cobb, and his bat wasn't really that far behind Cobb either. For being a dead era ball guy, he had some punch. Well over 1,100 of his career 3,514 hits went for extra bases, and he still holds the all-time record for doubles. 792 career doubles, led the league 8 times in doubles. 4 years went over 50, and to boot, he's also 6th all-time in triples with 222. Now, the season after this card was put out, 1912, Tris won the MVP. He then was still with the Boston Red Sox, which he played the first half of his career, but then with some contract disputes, he ended up with Cleveland after that. And he was player manager of that 1920 Indians team that lost Ray Chapman after he got hit in the head with a pitch from Carl Mays. But that team won the World Series, so Tris won a World Series. And on that team, not only was the manager, he hit .388 and had 8.6 WAR. He was 32 years old then. He retired when he was 40 in 1928 with an incredible 135 career WAR. Made it to the Hall of Fame in the second class, 1937. And, though he was, personal life stuff, he was recruited as a KKK member coming from Texas in his younger years, but he, whether, I'm not sure what the circumstances were that he joined the KKK, but he seemed to really have changed at heart as he aged. And in 1947, he actually became Larry Doby's personal coach to turn him from a second baseman to an outfielder. Doby played second base in the Negro Leagues and became a good outfielder, and he gave Tris Speaker a lot of that credit on turning him into a good outfielder. So, T205, Tris Speaker. And the last card to show for the day is this 1941 Gaudi Mel Ott, the great little 5'9", 170-pound right fielder who popped 511 career home runs with that big left-sided leg kick. These 41 Gaudis, not near as common as the 33s or 34s. I like them as much, though, at least the fronts. I don't like the backs as much. The fact that they're blank. 33s and 34s are pretty cool on the backs. But I do like the fronts. They come with these variations. There's 4 different colors. And for Mel Ott anyway, the green is the most populous. There's 33 of those graded from PSA. The red and the yellow each have 23. And then the blue is actually the least graded, at least, with 20 of them. SGC doesn't delineate which color they are, so their pop report just tells you there's 65 total graded. So not a big, kind of a pop report. So I'm guessing between PSA and SGC, you probably got less than 30 of these blue. Although this one, is ungraded, and I'm sure there's a lot more ungradeds out there. Forgot to tell, I was going to tell pop reports too on Harry Wright. There is 17 total graded between PSA and SGC. So not a lot of these cards you're going to find. Of course, there's an ungraded one. So how many of those are out there? Who knows? Here's the 3 cards we featured today. Hopefully you enjoyed it, and have a Merry Christmas, because I don't think I'm going to do another one before Christmas. Have a Merry Christmas, everybody, and see you next time.